Gravity Falls, and when you think about it for a second, that's actually a really hardcore name for a place. Like, that has got some super badass mission in a Halo series vibe to it. But it's not that, it's an animated comedy show with increasingly paranormal and mystery elements to it, X-Files style, that ends sufficiently anime enough with a bunch of kids fighting an eldritch horror who is effectively a god. It's also done by Alex Hirsch, a guy whose content I really like and who is renowned for other stuff such as voicing King and Hootie in Owl House, voicing the curator in Amphibia,
Welcome to my Museum of Oddities! I go by many names!
And being a writer on Inside Job, a series that deserved to last longer than it did.
Office manages every conspiracy in the world. Can you manage to show up on time?
Yeah, he's actually been involved in most of my favourite animated series from the past 5 years, and so it might surprise a bunch of you that before this video, I'd never actually seen Gravity Falls. I'd heard a lot of great things about it and had put it on my list, but there's only so much time in a day, and there was frankly too much trans content to cover in the world that I often find myself a little bit swamped as one person and overwhelmed. And so I have to sometimes do a bit of cherry picking, find an episode that spoke to me personally as particularly useful for considering trans identity or trans community, especially when it comes to a series like Gravity Falls, which doesn't actually have a canon trans character. I mean, there are fan theories about certain people, and there is all that eldritch horror that makes you ask the question, what the hell even is gender to a being that doesn't exist within our particular cultural confines?
Oh, I know lots of things.
Lots of things.
But when it comes down to it, there isn't a definitive person to push forward and highlight. So, what I'm going to do instead here is discuss the two characters that often get pointed towards as being trans, or having trans elements that connect to people, go over the facts about what that interpretation links to, and whether it makes a lot of sense / has some meaning to it, before finishing off with discussing an episode that I personally found to be rather interesting from a gender perspective. One that gave me some thoughts about what a cis person might be able to take away from it, or that a trans person might find useful through it. Yeah, we're talking about Dipper and Grenda first and foremost, then moving on to Carpet Diem from Season 1, when Dipper and his twin sister Mabel swap bodies thanks to some of that freaky sci-fi mystery shenanigans that the show is full of.
Today we investigate Gravity Falls anomaly number 82.
So, what is the deal with Dipper being trans first? Well, the answer to that is relatively simple and also kind of complex at the same time. The simple answer is that he isn't transgender at all. He is a character who is based on the childhood experiences of the creator of the show, Alex Hirsch, and is used to explore those lived themes through a more fantastical and animated setting.
Mabel, do you believe in ghosts?
I believe you're a big dork.
The complicated answer is that when you dig deep into all the appearances of Dipper, a lot of appearances which involve an exploration of femininity and engaging with concepts of gender outside of the assigned one that Dipper occupies, you find a few fans who are really dedicated to viewing that as an aspect of transcoding. That Dipper is a trans man or trans mask who was identical twins with his sister before coming out.
Is that what you're trying to say? I'm not male? I'm not a man? Is that?
Is that what you're getting at?
There are also a couple of lies that get spread, such as the idea that the creator confirmed this transcoding as something that he put into it, which he totally didn't, and also that the two are supposedly identical twins, and that must mean they have the same biological gender, which the first part of that statement also isn't true. They're based on Alex and his twin sister, who were not identical at all, so it's already sort of a dead point. But secondly, you can also have identical twins of different assigned genders. It is pretty rare, but it can indeed happen. These lies were used to try and justify what is ultimately a headcanon by getting spread around as canonical truths, which makes them a little bit obnoxious because firstly, they muddy the waters of what is and what isn't written into the text of the media itself, or indeed what was intended as subtext by the creators, something which is a huge pain in the ass when it comes to doing analysis of a series, for example. And secondly, I don't like the implication that Dipper being feminine in some ways must mean that he is a trans boy. Like, let guys be feminine if they want to be. You can headcanon anyone you personally want to be trans, and I won't stop you from doing it. But I do think that we shouldn't be using stereotypes when it comes to how we justify those headcanons, or attempt to argue that the headcanons are really, actually true canon.
There are many people who genuinely believe that this might be more than just a headcanon.
That's the complex answer, and as you can see, it is a little bit tricky. And that idea of stereotype being the motivating factor behind how some people try and find trans representation within text is something that ties into our next character that often gets discussed as being potentially trans from a fan side perspective. Grenda.
Hey, what's on your shirt? Ha! Gullible! Loser!
Now, the reason that Grenda is on here at all is because there are people out there who seem to ask the question of others about her being a trans kid, or who seem to have taken that interpretation themselves, and the majority justification that I can find from digging into it for that is because Grenda expresses herself in not 100% stereotypical binary feminine ways, has a thicker frame than an average animated TV show girl, has a deeper voice, and occasionally has jokes about her gender within the show.
Droned only by the deepest voiced druids of old.
On it!
Now, this is one of those cases where my usual line of telling people that their headcanon for trans characters is fine maybe doesn't hold up as well as it normally does, because with those kind of fan interpretations, I would realistically like the justifications for them to be rooted in something that is more than just gender binary enforcement. Like, just because a woman has any of those features doesn't mean that she is automatically a trans person in any possible direction. I mean, one of them is really offensive to cis women, and one of them's pretty offensive to trans women, and it doesn't mean that those features are some transvestigation cheat code for figuring out who's really trans. I guess what I'm saying is that I prefer when trans headcanons are done in a way that utilizes the story or narrative side of a character to connect with. It takes more of the identity that is expressed and the way that it breaks with gender barriers or becomes analogous for a trans community's lived experiences, than when the trans audience interpretation comes purely from just physical features that could realistically exist on anyone, and does feel like it's attempting to biologically lump all trans people together in a monolith. Because a deep voice, a thick frame, more masculine features, an Adam's apple, none of those are things that every trans woman has. And a lot of those are things that certain cis women do indeed have as well.
Why don't women have Adam's apples? The answer is I can't answer that 'cause women do have Adam's apple.
It's just a problem that I think arises when your trans headcanon comes rooted in gender stereotyping. And what I think is far more useful in these cases to say is that rather than calling Grenda a trans character potentially, is to say that what she represents is a breaking of those binary models that hurt everyone in a manner that is both beneficial to cis and trans women. I mean, as you might see in this video, Grenda is actually not very positive at all, but that's an inclusive way of viewing things that doesn't seek to determine certain factors as being ones that indicate transness. Certain factors rooted in transphobic binary models and stereotypes yet again. So yeah, that's my initial thing I want to say on certain headcanons in regards to Gravity Falls, and is a big reason for why I do think that sometimes the audience interpretation of characters as being trans does end up falling into those methods that make people wary of it in the future, that make people hate all trans analogies and trans reimaginations and trans analyses because they presume that everyone is doing it like that. Yeah, I have dealt with that a lot myself, and I find myself constantly having to do a lot of work to try and distinguish those nuances for people who watch my videos, to make it clear the difference between something that is beneficial in the grander gender conversation and towards trans acceptance and actual transgender representation and characterizations. And with all of that said, the episode that we are discussing here is one of those moments. It is one of those episodes whose value comes more from the external audience connection to it and the themes it explores in a way that is beneficial to expanding people's notions of gender identity, as well as being something that presents potential egg-breaking moments via its body swap gender identity shenanigans, rather than being an explicit trans episode. And let's get into it now that I have done a bit of due diligence on having a broader conversation around Gravity Falls. So, the initial motivating factor for this episode is that Dipper is feeling somewhat out of place when his sister is getting more and more involved in activities with her girl group. Specifically, a sleepover at the start, which then morphs into Dipper wanting to move out and be in his own room to get away from feeling like an outsider. Which makes Mabel feel out of place because she is used to spending time around her brother and she doesn't want him to move out.
That's it. That's the final straw. Maybe we shouldn't share a room anymore.
The episode also features a few of my favourite characters that I've seen so far. The first one being Pig.
Is that legal?
The judges say it's out of bounds.
Because I just love silly animals who have good vibes. The second being Wendy, who is so clearly queer from the outset, and while she never does any explicit queer stuff within the show, she was canonized as bisexual by the creator afterwards, which, yeah, sure, that's not great that we didn't get it on screen, but also, let's face it, she is clearly fucking gay from every single goddamn moment featuring her, so I'll take it.
Back! Get back, or I will drop kick him, I swear!
Even the ones with her doing het shit are pretty queer, let's be honest. And the third one is Zeus, who's actually kind of similar to the pig in the sense that he just seems to have good vibes, and the universe seems to reward his chill and lax approach towards it.
I am the world's most perfect man.
The episode also features Grenda as part of the girl group that Mabel is spending time in, and I've got to say, we do see all the problems that people discuss around her really being emphasized here quite hard.
Boys make me think about kissing.
Candy! Oh my god!
There is a bizarre situation where she is constantly getting put down by the writing and narrative for her body. A lot of comments that relate to the idea that she is masculine and has manly features, and even a moment which sees someone express an amount of support for who she is, a moment that relies upon the comedy of us interpreting that support as a joke because of what it's saying.
Oh, you're already so beautiful, Grenda. What would be the point?
Beautiful!
It's kinda sexist and homophobic and transphobic in the underlying subconscious idea of it. And it's one of those sort of mean comments and insult style jokes that relies upon a lot of touched upon cruelty in the manner of attacking a person's identity as being other, that does feature as the groundwork or foundation for a lot of the bigotries that I literally just mentioned and discuss a lot on this channel, and am always thinking about. So yeah, I kinda love Grenda for who she is, but not for what the show wants me to think or feel about her.
I don't know what I was kissing in there, but I have no regrets!
Regardless, all the fighting between the siblings leads to them getting into a competition-based brawl to earn points with Stan to see who gets this new room that has been discovered. A new room that has a mysterious aura to it and a carpet with some interesting iconography and a tag that literally says experiment on it because subtlety is for fucking fools. The carpet turns out to be one of those mind-swapping, or body-swapping, depending on how you look at it, objects that leads to Dipper and Mabel swapping bodies, while still keeping the same voices for the audience at least, so we know which one is which when they are that one. I guess.
What happened?
Dipper? Why are you wearing my clothes?
I confused myself a little bit there. And instantly, this show does something that not many other body swap shows really lean into, which is having the ostensibly cis characters freak out in a massive way at this bodily change, as Mabel vomits and punches herself while Dipper sits in the corner as a complete fucking breakdown. Something which is a pretty fair response to having your body become one of the gender that you do not identify with.
This isn't happening! This isn't happening! This isn't happening!
One could argue it's because they don't like the body of each other, but let's focus on the more subtextual ideas here. Trans people have decades of forcing themselves to deal with that shit. Decades that absolutely lead to mental trauma and severe coping issues, but which also give you a more stretched out level of the horror, while this shit is imminent and apparent immensely, and we know that a cis person would absolutely feel huge dysphoria and have massive problems if they found themselves in a differently gendered body for a period of time. There is also a moment here that I'm sure some Dipper is trans fans have used to add credence to their theory. Namely that Dipper takes a moment to recheck himself in the mirror when he confirms that he is Mabel. And yeah, I guess that could be seen as a bit of potential headcanon fodder, much the same as all the moments in the episode involving Dipper doing somewhat feminine things. It's not exactly supporting the Dipper is a trans guy headcanon as much as it's supporting the Dipper is a trans girl headcanon, but he has actually been perceived in both those directions from different fans, and I've got to assume they must be fighting at some point. And let's be honest, if you're looking for that and want that to be true, then you can certainly have what you're trying to force look like it's real no matter where you go digging.
Great! Just what we need. More Gravity Falls weirdness.
There is some interesting language changes as the episode continues with these two in their new bodies and trying to mess with each other in the name of furthering their own position in the competition for the room. Language changes that reflect them trying to come to terms with that different gender identity than the one they are used to, including this very interesting scene of Mabel writing down a bunch of stuff on a note in the room about who can and can't be allowed in the room based on gender.
It's Candy and Grenda!
before the episode turns into a big clusterfuck of everyone swapping bodies on the carpet. The everyone being the whole girl group and the pig and Zeus and some cops.
My horoscope didn't say anything about this.
Eventually, things go back to normal as the siblings realise some things about each other, have a heart-to-heart about the changes, and ultimately keep spending time together because they like doing it, while also better understanding what each of them is going through body-wise. Especially Mabel, who got forced into a very weird and awkward talk about biology by Stan because he thought she was spying on the girls as Dipper.
He may be little, but he has big plans.
But anyways, that's the episode. And as you can see, like I said, this is not a trans episode. It is not an episode which features a trans storyline or a trans character or a trans narrative, and so the question quickly and appropriately becomes, why the hell am I talking about it then? And the answer to that being that the main reason I selected it was due to the audience interpretation aspect, and yet again, as I mentioned, the egg-breaking potential of it for children which watched it. See, even an episode that isn't trans, but which does touch upon discussions and ideas of gender and gender identity being changed, are episodes that lend themselves to both expanding the way that the cis audience is able to consider gender in its many forms as being something that is kind of malleable or repositionable, or at least giving those cis people the building blocks for thinking about gender at all, because a lot of times when I talk to people, you see that so many cis people have never ever thought about gender in any way, shape or form, that they've never even considered the ramifications of it upon them and the way that it influences and affects so much of our culture and society and lives, as well as the episode being something which can lead a trans person who's not realised that facet about themselves yet to having that moment which gives them a pause. Having those feelings that lead to the first cracks in considering their own identity, because they see something which leads to them wondering, what if?
No! Then again, I like having muscles for once.
Wow, now I have tiny little doll hands!
If a trans kid sees Mabel and Dipper switch bodies and says to themselves, hey, what happened if that occurred to me? How would I feel about that? And then finds that it gives them euphoria, or that it connects in some way to a daydream about how they would want to change their own lives, that's the initial spur of media motivation that can lead to the path of figuring out who you are. Can be that triggering factor which starts an avalanche of realization and introspection. And all of that is incredibly important and valid to the way of considering media that exists outside of the scope of explicitly trans narrative and trans character. Because there are a ton of shows and movies that trans people connect with that for a lot of people don't seem like they have any relevance or make any sense for that connection to exist from, and yet it still happens, and they still do. And knowing why that is lets us think about trans media history as being more than just the blatant and obvious moments that everyone is kind of aware of. So yeah, that's why I did the episode, and why I would defend its inclusion here on this channel. It's not for what it does within the show, but for what it does outside of it. For the impacts that it has despite its lack of actual transness.
You're probably feeling awkward and sweaty, huh?
Yeah. How'd you know?
And that's the video. And I hope that you liked it, or you enjoyed the ride, or that you just found it to be educational, or, I don't know, good background noise. All of them are perfectly valid ways for you to experience what I'm making here, and I'm happy with any of them, honestly. I'm just happy people are watching what I make. It's a pretty low bar. If you really like what I've done here, the best way to show that is by going to my Patreon or my Ko-Fi and helping to financially support the channel there. The names of those in the $5 category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I am massively appreciative to all of these people for helping to keep what I'm doing here going. It pays for my bills like internet, food, rent, power, cat, and trust me, the cat does get a little bit expensive sometimes, especially because he's having urine blockage issues, like a lot of male cats do apparently. Look, we don't need to get into the medical health of my cat here, just know that it's on the list of bills. Love the little guy, my god he's expensive. But all of the Patreon stuff does help to pay for that, because it provides me an accessible and regular income source. Something which is really important, especially because the New Zealand economy right now has gone into the fucking shitter, and the chance of me getting a job is very, very goddamn low. So being able to have YouTube as my job does go a long way to letting me be able to live. And being able to live lets me keep making videos. And we need to keep that going for at least a couple more years, because I really want to finish up this trans series. And I also want to make a deep dive about Pokemon, which I want to do mostly because A, I love fucking Pokemon, I play it every week with my friends, I constantly am thinking about it, and also because Lily Orchard made a goddamn video and people keep mixing me up with her, and trust me, I'm better than that, okay? I'm gonna make a better video, and I'm gonna show everybody. Spite can be a good motivator sometimes, but I also want to finish off the Riverdale brief look. And I've got a few more ideas for how to change the channel when it comes to the end of this trans analysis journey. I'm not planning to go anywhere just yet, and so being able to keep going with the support of people like those on my Patreon and Ko-Fi is a pretty good thing for that. But aside from all of that, a huge thanks as well to everybody who watched this video, and those who share it with other people, or who click on my other stuff, or who comment with suggestions for what else I could consider. It's all massively helpful towards letting me continue doing this channel on YouTube, and as I've mentioned multiple times now at this point, I would like to keep doing that. So, yet again, big thanks to just anybody and everybody involved with this process, and I hope that you all have a great day.